If you've done therapy, religion, or self help and still feel anxious, empty, or stuck, this chapter explains why and what actually helps when people move from the darkness into the light. This is chapter 1 of There's a Hole in My Love Cup. Therapy just doesn't work for me. Quick note, this is for reflection and education, not therapy or medical advice. Chapter 1, Therapy Just Doesn't Work for Me. So, there was a story that I was told several times as a kid. It's the story of a man who lived his entire life in a forest in a valley between giant mountain ranges. Deep, deep into those woods was his small cottage. There was a heavy wooden door, canopy of the high treetops and high mountains forever shrouding his home and vast environs in darkness. Always darkness. He would venture out of his hermitage each day, dressed in his big overcoat, whether to chop wood for the fire, kill an animal to eat, or just to work this quiet, dark life he had carved out for himself. Some days his wanderings weren't far, some days they were quite far. On one particular day, his hunt took him far from his cottage, farther than he'd ever been. After a full morning of walking and stalking animals, he laid himself down to rest before commencing his return. As he slept, the strangest thing happened. An altogether new sensation took over his body. He awoke from his slumber to find it very bright. There was, it seemed, an opening in the canopy of the forest and a break in the mountain range beyond it, and through it came something he'd never experienced before, a light as bright and warming as the very fires that he would gather wood to create. It stayed for only a brief period of time, but the brightness and the warmth were completely new and bewildering. He liked it, but simultaneously was somewhat afraid, as it was something that he'd never experienced before in his life. He returned home that afternoon, all while thinking about the particularly yet wonderful experience that he had just had. In fact, that experience rather consumed his thoughts for a great many days. So much so that he finally resolved to go back. And so he did. One day, then again another day, each time growing more fond of that brief brightness and heat. Yet one day, so mesmerized was he by the experience, he resolved to bring with him extra food and a blanket so that he might walk farther, perhaps discovering more of this brightness and warmth, prepared to stay the night if necessary. And find it he did. The following day he discovered an open field covered in only tall wild grasses. For the first time in his life he encountered something other than dense, dark forest, open space. And as he gazed up in wonderment at not only the full sky, but the two mountain ranges of his valley, he noticed the light moving across one of the ranges, slowly making the sky brighter and warming the air. He watched with bated breath as the first dawning of the light swept across his entire landscape, and colors seemed to spring to life. He removed his overcoat as its heat was no longer necessary. Before long, the light had not only run over him and warmed his body and face completely, but became so bright that he had to shield his eyes. The whole experience was the most glorious thing he had ever felt. And there, in the grasses, he fell into a new deep slumber as he had never experienced before. However, he knew he could not stay long. He had not brought provisions for 2 nights' stay, and he missed the safety of his tiny dark cottage. So after his warm nap, he walked back to the edge of the forest, and with one last backward glance at the marvel of it all, he ducked back into the dark wood and began his long trek back to his cottage, deep inside the canopy of the dark forest. It was an arduous journey to be done in one day, and his overcoat seemed hotter and heavier than normal, even unnecessary, having been heated by the light. But stoked by a head full of new thoughts and even more questions, it was as if time did not exist. He was home before he knew it. Opening the thick, solid front door, he gazed inside to his familiar everything, and for the first time in his life had a sensation of how small his home really was. The table he had hewn as a boy, the chair, The rug he had weaved with his own hands, all of it was warm in its own way, but small, tight even. For many days after, he worked or hunted or ate his meals in silence. His mind forever returned to the field, the soaring mountains, the absence of darkness, and that mesmerizing, warm, even hot light. Knowing he had to return and experience it again, and confident he could do it in a day. Now that he knew the way, he planned his trip. Just a day's provisions and his lighter coat so that he might move quicker, particularly on his return. And depart he did, leaving very early, arriving earlier than last time, staying slightly longer, and as last time, arriving to the door of his little cottage, even hitting his head at the top of the door frame as he entered. That's odd. I've never done that before, he thought. Well, he knew his cottage had not actually shrunk, except in his perception, he realized it could only have happened because he was, quite strangely, standing taller, upright, odd. And this began his journeys. His day's treks started earlier and earlier. His departure from the open field and its light got later and later, till one time the brightness had actually begun to slide past the other mountain range. That one was a more difficult hump back to the cottage. While energized by the light, it was also a very long day. But he made it. And yet again, for the seemingly hundredth time, he hit his head as he entered his ever littler home. Eventually, he started bringing 2-day provisions so that he could overnight near the field, just inside the canopy of the forest, as the safety of the woods was all he ever knew. He would spend 2 days in the light and then return. 2 became 4, 4 after he had erected a lean-to at the edge of the woods, now part in the woods and part in the field. And before long he had brought his hunting pieces and a basket for gathering the richest berries and seeds, which he had found on the yonder side of the field. And one day, as he lay in his makeshift grassy bed, clothed in the warmth and radiance of the light alone, he had the most startling epiphany. He realized he had everything. More, he realized that there was nothing, not one thing, except sheer familiarity, left to draw him back to his hermitage. There was simply nothing he wanted more that small yet familiar past home held for him. He had not only found a new home, but a new life, a whole new body of experiences. So, for the first time, he took what had become a very long walk back to the cottage. For the next day or two, he assembled the 1 or 2 things left in his food stores, but everything else, the chair, the table, the rug, well, they were the past, and he knew it. The next morning he slept in, woke, ate, dressed lightly, placing his old overcoat on the bed, made sure the fireplace was completely wet, and walked out, closing the old wood door behind him, running his hand over the dark lumber, and with a smile he turned and left, never to set eyes upon this tiny house again, never ever again. That day his new life fully and finally began. Living in the light. This is the journey from darkness to light. This is what it is to finally come alive in this lifetime. Done rightly, this movement from a life of darkness to one of light is what the therapy experience is supposed to be. Whether it comes at the hands of a psychologist, a priest or a pastor, a gifted friend, or some other source of wise counsel, this movement from dark, small, and hidden to open, warm, and bright, and fully alive is the goal of introspection, courage, and a life lived deliberately. Unfortunately, there seems to be a dearth of people, whether professional or lay, who possess both the personal experience and the capacity to transform others necessary to facilitate movement from darkness to light. Yet, this is very much what is needed most. This is, indeed, the great longing in our society, the longing to live in the light and to have people who actually possess the ability to help us get there, who know the journey of the dark forest and who can come back in and help us get out, who can, in short, set our soul free, who can take us from pain and darkness to joy, peace, and light. I believe this is spirit work, not as normally construed by those typically charged with tending spiritual matters, i.e., religion. I believe what is most necessary for the liberation of so many caught in the darkness of unhappiness and even misery, despite all the possessions and accoutrements of supposed happiness in America, is the deepest inner work of the soul. If there is one thing that I have learned as a spiritual counselor for 25 years, speaking and lecturing at the graduate and undergraduate levels in the fields of spirituality and sociology of religion, if there is one thing I've learned as the son of two spiritual leaders, one pastor and one seminary professor, the nephew of four clergy uncles, and the grandson of a woman who told her country pastor to stick it and started her own church in the 1940s. If there's one thing that I've learned as a man who has committed his life to his own spiritual journey and facilitating the spiritual growth of others, is this: life is fair, very, very fair. Despite the nearly ubiquitous belief to the contrary, despite the incessant life's not fair caterwauling of so many people who haven't won some life lottery yet, the old spiritual maxim rings true. The rain falls on the just and the unjust, the rich and the poor, the old and the young. Specifically, life is unflinchingly fair when it comes to pain. No one escapes life without pain, without suffering, without anxiety and emptiness of the soul. No one goes through life without some form of spiritual depression. No one goes unscathed. No one. Back on point, pain is what unites us all. That sounds a bit morbid, but perhaps it's not. It's just truth. And it is that unity in pain that binds us, that brings out our compassion for each other, and that galvanizes human endeavors towards the same goal: to be loved and to be happy, to fight together the ugly animal of pain and her brother, the fear of pain, seeking to pull us down into despair and deadness of the soul. So, if that be true, then the real challenge of life is getting from pain to love and happiness. We're going to pause for a quick word from our sponsor.
Though, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're doing all the things to manifest? Journaling, visualizing, raising your vibe. But your dream still feels like a really cute cloud that just keeps drifting out of reach. That's not your fault. You're manifesting with Jupiter, the planet of expansion, of vision, of dreaming big and feel good. And yes, Jupiter is the party. It's that high-frequency energy that says, you can have more, you are meant for more. But here's the truth. Jupiter gives you the dream, but Saturn builds the damn road. Saturn is structure. Saturn is systems. Saturn is showing up even when you don't feel like it. Saturn says, you want it? Cool. Let's get to work. Real manifestation? It's a cosmic collab. Jupiter for the vision, Saturn for the follow-through. You don't just need the vibe, you need the vessel to hold it. So ask yourself, are you dreaming or building? The universe isn't just listening, it's watching what you build. Manifestation isn't just vibes, it's engineering your evolution. Inside the Alchemist Laboratory, we don't just vibe high and journal pretty affirmations, we build systems for your soul. We map transits into the body using your solar map so you know when to dream and when to design. And we help you create sustainable magic, not just spiritual highs.
Getting there. Tragically, the elements of society that have grown up over time to meet or, at the very least, assuage that spiritual longing inside have largely failed us. Religion has fallen out of esteem and become inept for a great many people, even many of the religion themselves. I'm a former pastor and know what religion, done well, is capable of, but it has fallen into such a sad state of disrepair in America. And Psychology, whose business is internal pain and which I also have respect for, continues to disappoint a lot of people. And so the longing and emptiness persist from one day into the next, year after tumbling year. What I'm getting at and what really needs to be spoken for us to start together on a solid base in our spiritual work together is that if we are completely honest, for a great many of us, there is no healing and no path to the light. There is nothing, it seems, that really makes the numbness and the unhappiness of life go away permanently. There are quick fixes and mild things that paper over the gnawing unhappiness, but there is no permanent fix, or so it feels. Whether it's in the confessional booth or the pastor's study of your local church, or whether it's in the office of your marriage and family counselor of your psychologist, for a great many people, therapy just doesn't hit the nail. This means we have a country full of people who are not making the transition from fear to happy and from pain to love, both outside and inside. You're stumbling through life, hurting on the inside, fumbling relationships and careers, running from the tidal waves of emotions, staying as busy as you can. You keep struggling for control of life. You've created a great illusion on the outside: good career, good family, good kids, good title, good spouse, good financial picture. Perhaps it's not just good, but great. All of your willingness and control have made a life that looks very presentable on the outside, but your illusion of control stops at your skin. Once the story moves inside, everything is out of control, isn't it? You've reached out to friends, to clergy perhaps, and of course to therapists, perhaps several therapists. Or maybe, like many of my most successful clients, you've reached out to no one, but just kept running from it, denying it, or stuffing it down. Yet nothing helps. Or you're sick of running. Tiny gains are regularly outweighed by massive frustrations, not to mention the loss of money, time, and energy from ineffective therapy. And all the while, your ever turning mind rages on and on with confusion, self doubt, longing to know your true self loathing, brief spurts of willpower that later get bogged down by lethargy, anger, or just plain exhaustion. A hearty mix of anxiety and depression in one form or another rule your life, even when you're able to keep them well hidden, even when you stay medicated or self medicated. You're just a hairbreadth away from losing it at any moment, aren't you? And nothing seems to help, especially the one thing that is supposed to make this very unhappiness go away: therapy. Some people have good experiences in therapy, but sadly, a great many people don't. And so you're left feeling stuck. You can't get yourself out of your own problems, and you can't seem to find anyone who can help you. There are countless reasons it may not work for you. For example, if you're a guy, therapy stinks because it feels like therapists have it in for you before you even walk in the door. Heck, therapy as a profession, as well as a science and society, are convinced that men are utterly devoid of feelings, less developed emotionally, and purely incapable of expressing feelings, all of which are asinine beliefs, patently untrue, if anything. I have found men to often be my most honest, open, and highly sensitive clients, if and only if they have a therapist they both trust and respect. How many times have you heard girls develop emotionally faster than boys, and men don't express their feelings well? Such condescending beliefs have become this giant cultural myth. So you're deemed an emotional invalid before the first conversation even starts, and are forever dogged by the feeling that you are looked down upon. Or, if that's not always the case, the industry is so rampant with this belief system that men are quite reasonably skeptical of the field, thereby unwilling and unable to conjure the trust upon which great therapy is predicated. Perhaps you're a woman for whom therapy stinks because you get 8 to 10 sessions into it telling your life story, revealing all of your pain before you realize your psychologist blows because she has nothing original. She has no deep insight, no challenging questions with which to push you and encourage your growth, nothing to contribute at all. You realize that you're paying someone to do nothing but sit back and listen to you as if you are able to self direct your therapy, failing to realize that if you knew how to fix your doggone self, you wouldn't be seeing a therapist to begin with. And what's worse is that you then leave that therapist and move on to the next therapist who was recommended by some friend, only to discover 8 to 10 sessions in that this one isn't even 1 ounce better than the last. And so you're stuck in this ugly, wasteful, frustrating chapter upon chapter of spilling your guts and getting nowhere. Or almost worse than that, you stay in a counseling relationship that isn't getting you anywhere, and you know it isn't getting you anywhere, but you stay because it's familiar and it's safe, never pushing you very hard out of your comfort zone, yet allowing you to live in an illusion that you're actually doing something to solve your life problems. Perhaps you are withholding large chunks of truth from your therapist, fearing what she will think of you, fearing the ramifications of admitting your truth, or fearing the seemingly great unknown if you were to really start opening up. Worse still, it is far more common than you'd think. A great many folk actually flat out lie to their therapists. Yes, they pay someone to help them, but then give disinformation, preferring to stay deeply rooted in their own inertia and fears. And sadly, most therapists have no idea how to break through the lies and the fear that keep people from opening up. But interestingly, the real problem isn't just that you dislike therapy, or maybe you like it but are very, very discontent with the whole thing. The real problem is that therapy so often doesn't work. Let's be clear. If your therapy actually powerfully and permanently worked, you likely wouldn't be reading this book. There would be no need. And so, in the end, what this really means is that you're just craving something that can actually fully and finally help you, right? I mean, isn't what you really want more than anything to be over the crud that you know is there in you and in your life? Isn't that what you really want to be healed finally and definitively? Isn't what you really want to know peace, know purpose, and know true clarity of life, to know actual happiness when you wake up in the morning? Well, I'm here to tell you it's not only possible, it's quite doable and it's doable quickly. But it means going into some heavy stuff, perhaps the very stuff that you've been avoiding your entire life. You know, the stuff that you've been running from, because until you look at it, sit in it, and deal with the real stuff of your past and your life and your fears, you ain't never going anywhere. Ignore the double negatives throughout the book. You get the point. You're going to stay stuck, just making new iterations of the same problems for years and for decades. And you'll get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s with nothing more than resigned regret. And truth is, you don't want that, do you? Of course not. You want life. You want to finally feel alive, not just once, not till the weekly therapy session wears off, but daily and permanently. We're going to pause for a quick word from our sponsor. What if your birth chart could tell you exactly how you manifest best? You've got air, water, fire, and earth in your chart, but how you work with them, that's where the real magic is. Welcome to your elemental magic reading, a reading that's part astrology, part ritual science, and all you. I'm not just reading your chart, I'm decoding how you move energy from the idea to the emotion to the action to the result. Find out which one runs your life and which one's asleep at the wheel. This reading will call it out with love and fire. Rituals customized to your energy, not some copy-paste Pinterest witchcraft. Want to know how you have magic? This elemental magic reading isn't just a vibe, it's the first key into the vault of the alchemist laboratory. This isn't about memorizing astrology, It's about learning to live it. Book your elemental magic reading now. Alchemist Lab members get first dibs, deeper discounts, and secret sources. If you know, you know. If you don't, well, there's still time to remember. Badass counseling. My method, badass counseling, is the rather organic result of my belief that I could do it better. Decades ago, having been raised by a family of spiritual leaders who succeeded, failed, and exceeded many times over, I began to explore what would need to happen to create highly effective spiritual counsel and leadership. This requires going deep in my own spiritual crud, where all the good spiritual journeys start, wrestling with it all, clearing it out, and beginning to craft spiritual solutions from the soil up. My method is nearly 3 decades of work condensed into a very tight, very fast, very overwhelming, and very effective technique for taking very highly successful individuals, couples, families, and even organizations and groups from pain to happiness and from fear to love. It is the fusion of wisdom, spirituality, athleticism, creativity, and academic traditions, and a big old dose of fire, violence of the soul, and hard work. The rain falls on the unjust and the just. We all do suffer in life. Pain is as integral to life as sunshine and water. Most people make the mistake of running from it rather to it. But I come from athletics and military, where the most difficult, painful, violent, challenging, failure filled workouts yield the greatest fruit. Over the past 25 years, weaving that military and athletics past into my lifetime of religion and spirituality as a pastor's kid and later a pastor myself, I radically changed my understanding of God. When I was an NCAA head coach for strength, my teams would come into my gym for the express purpose of being made stronger, faster, bigger, and most importantly, mentally tougher. But muscle growth and mental growth does not occur during the workout. Muscles are essentially torn down during the workout. Muscle growth occurs in the period of rest after the workout. But if the athlete, whether novice or professional, is not first taken to failure, fatigue, and extreme hardship, the athlete will not ever become stronger, faster, meaner, and bigger. Ever. Muscle growth is 100% dependent upon being torn down first. Somewhere in the last 20 years, I had the epiphany that that is exactly how God works. Thanks to the research of Joseph Campbell, we know that one of the meta themes extended across nearly all religions and sacred scriptures, past or present, is this notion that the gods send trials, not as punishment, but as strengthening agents. Particularly in the Judeo Christian gospel and history, there is an absence of evidence that God uses bad to create good. It is not just that God redeems bad created by humanity, but actually sends it for the upbuilding of humanity. One need look no further than the central Christian story. God sent his son, knowing full well in advance that the boy would suffer and die, so that humanity would forever have new life. God uses supposed bad to create good. The things we perceive to be painful are meant for our growth and strength, so that we may further become instruments of God's love in the world. Just as my athletes would hate me at the end of their workouts, and you'll likely hate your trainer or coach at the end of leg day, we at times hate God, or at least hate what we perceive to be God's recriminations and scorching of our lives. God is effectively the great coach in the sky, so to speak. Everything, even perceived pain, is for your growth. Everything. This is why so much therapy, whether psychological, spiritual, or even life coaching, yoga, and energy healing, just isn't that effective. Either it fails to go deep enough to the root sources of an individual's pain, which are usually found in childhood, or it seeks only to release the physical and emotional pain associated with the initial wounding. But the point of soul work isn't the pain you experienced, but what the experience taught you about yourself. It's not enough to release the pain. It is to ask the pain what it was sent, either by the universe, God, or your own soul, to teach you about yourself and about life. The purpose of going into the crud from your past is also to discern the effect of those negative experiences had on your core belief systems about yourself. And very, very few people can do that work on their own, unguided by a teacher. One of the purposes of this book is to both purge your pain and help you discern what that pain has been trying to teach you. Your problem, or one of them, is simply that you've been framing pain wrongly. You've been incorrectly taught that pain of your life was either completely random, bad luck, if you will, as if completely outside of the scope of God's power, your fault, or God's punishment, all of which are wrong. Whether you like it or not, everything is to make you stronger and wiser. And the sooner you see it as such, i.e., the sooner you stop running from your pain and start asking the pain and the gods in what ways this hardship is the greatest blessing of your life, the sooner you become a more powerful and more compassionate agent of God's love in the world. God is love and a loving God. Unfortunately, far, far too many lay people, pastors, and theologians make the grand mistake of wanting loving God to mean nice God. People repeat the ridiculous and ill-begotten nonsense. God doesn't send pain, or God would never hurt humanity or me. But there is no biblical precedence for such thinking. Heck, there ain't nowhere in any religion scripture or where God is pitched as nice. Just like the great coaches in any sport, God kicks our butts to strengthen us, and sometimes that ass whooping doesn't feel nice and it even hurts. Those who've sought to disciple the maxim of no pain and no gain in the athletic world would be quite uncomfortable and out of sorts with honest spirituality. God ain't nice, and God never was. And loving never meant always nice. What feels like the incessant pain of life is God forever trying to grow you and push you and challenge you, knock you around, rattle you and shred you, all for your pruning, your growth, your depth, your strength, and the long-lasting oxytocin release of true peace. And you've been running from it. You've been running from the greatest instruments of your growth, the greatest conduit to your happiness, like a lazy man or coward runs from hard workouts or avoids the gym. My work is with those who are looking for something different, those whom regular counsel, religion, and psychology just don't work, those who feel marginalized by the process, and those individuals who aren't just having problems in their head, but whose souls are hurting, who have pain and emptiness inside. My work is like the hardest leg day in the gym, painful, especially in the beginning, but immensely fruitful after the crud and the pain are cleared away. And lastly, my work is with people who are looking for a counselor who is, on a personal level, a different animal, not your average counselor type, not your average spiritual type. For again, any good counsel grows out of woman or man herself, who she is, where she's been, the dragon she slayed, the wisdom she has mined from her suffering. It's a bit of that when Harry met Sally one-liner. I'll have what she's having. People want peace, power, purpose, and happiness they see lived in the life of the great counselor. Would you take investment advice from someone even poorer than you? Training advice from someone ever weaker or slower than you? So why, for the love of God, would you take soul advice and life counsel from someone whose message is canned from a book or and clearly not implemented in the person's life? So I'm asking you to take this ride with me. Trust me. Let me carry you. Open. Do the stuff I tell you to do. Read the books and listen to the songs I tell you to. Meditate on what I lay before you. Hear my words, and above all else, have the courage to go into yourself and sit in that which you've formerly run from. As you do that, begin to feel your truth. The goal is to begin and say, do, and become that which you truly are. Do not let the pain that you have experienced become your reason for distrusting the universe, God, and soul's work. For everyone is suffering, not just you. Pain is universal. What you do with it, specifically what you let it teach you about life and yourself, is what determines the trajectory of your life and the power of your communion with the spirit of the universe, as it whispers to you from deep within your soul. To finally become your truest self and find your greatest happiness, you must let go of the not so great life that you've been holding on to. Not just the pain, but the fears and the craving for security above all else. You must allow the grasp of that which is merely familiar to release you to find and live in the light and the warmth. You must let go of the neurotic longing for control. You must let yourself fall into the arms of the universe. It is speaking to you from within, it always has. And life doesn't truly begin until you begin to listen to that quiet inner voice and trust it. Trust what it's leading you to. Trust what it's leading you away from. And trust that no matter what happens, you'll be okay. Once you have the courage to trust, you then have the courage to say, be, do, become, have, and believe that which you truly are. That's when everything changes and the stuff begins to fall out of the sky. Stuff you can't even begin to imagine. I've seen it daily, weekly, consistently, both in my own life and in the lives of nearly all of my clients. I know it sounds hokey as heck, but I see magical, completely unexpected stuff happen in clients' lives as they clear the underbrush of the soul and begin to live their truth. Once you break through that will, that is the fear of revealing who you really are to the world, amazing things begin to happen in the most unexpected and glorious ways. Song recommendation. Throughout the course of this book, I will be offering songs for you to buy and use as part of your reading and meditation process. There is heavy stuff we're chewing on in this book, and sometimes getting the messages through music has the effect of feeling them more deeply, experiencing them more profoundly, and engaging them more meaningfully. In that vein, I commend to your listening pleasure and spirit work the powerfully intense music and lyrics of Evanescence Bring Me to Life. Journaling recommendations. All right, now we get into some really deep work. Take out a pad of paper and a pen, or sit at your laptop, or perhaps even thumb type in the notes section of your cell phone. I'm a big believer in pen and paper, but call me old school. We're going to do some heavy journaling here. If you've never really journaled, great. If you have, terrific. Doesn't matter. What you're getting into isn't journaling about the color of the sky and how pretty the trees and flowers are today. What we're journaling about is the real stuff going on inside of you, the stuff you've been running from. Until you reach the state of lasting bliss, you ought to be journaling daily. Heck, multiple times a day. The simplest way I have found to get my mind going when journaling is simply to write a question at the top of the page and then spend a page or 10 fleshing out my answers to that question. Just keep journaling until your mind and soul are empty, or until a new or deeper question comes up. Then go back in the direction of answering that question, or even coming back to a question from days or weeks earlier. There is no right or wrong answers, as long as you're just flushing out your feelings, not just your thoughts. Both. Just keep flushing it out of you. And there are certain default questions that you should always be coming back to, even if the question of the day were something completely different. Keep coming back to these questions. 1. What do I really, really feel about this? If I were to be totally honest. 2. Why? 3. What's really eating at me about this situation? 4. Why am I so angry, so sad, so afraid? 5. What is the single biggest and most powerful fear driving this whole situation? 6. Is there one person I'm having strong feelings about, and who? 7. What are those feelings? Anger, love, happiness, frustration, disappointment? 8. How is this hardship or pain I'm experiencing the single greatest blessing that could have ever happened to me? What are the gods trying to teach me with this pain? What am I still not learning or still resisting that the ongoing pain keeps trying to get through to me? 9. In what ways am I feeling called to be an instrument of stronger love and compassion in the world? How has the past pain, the past workouts in the spiritual gym with the badass coach in the sky perfectly prepared me for the work ahead? But for today's question at the top of your page, I want you to start with either of these questions or just put each of these questions below at the top of a different page and simply journal and journal until you're done for the day or this moment. 1. In your journal, list 5 of the most persistent irritants in your life. These are not just the giant pain sources in your life, these are the incredibly small yet ever present drains on your focus, energy, or happiness that are always there. 2. Now write out why each of these is such an irritant and how your life would be different. Be as specific as possible if each of these, item by item, were not in your life. 3. Next, tell me the story in your journal of the single most traumatic event in your life. Use as much detail as possible, as well as the most graphic, strong, even offensive language you can, if that is what you feel when you're writing it. Lastly, journal out the one decision above all else you most regret making in your entire life. Take a moment to notice what stirred for you as you listened. You don't need to fix it or understand it yet. If this resonated, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear what stood out for you. You can also find the full series and my work linked below.